The air in Dr. Eris Thorne's bioengineering lab hung heavy with the metallic tang of burnt circuitry and something else, something acrid and deeply unsettling. Twisted steel girders groaned faintly, still settling from the catastrophic event that had ripped through the space. Glass walls, once transparent partitions to high-tech workstations, were now jagged teeth, reflecting the pulsating emergency lights like scattered rubies. This wasn't just a lab, it was a tomb, meticulously designed for groundbreaking research, now reduced to a testament of violent entropy. Reed stepped over a collapsed ventilation duct, my boots crunching on a mosaic of shattered monitors and pulverized concrete. The initial assessment was already being whispered among the uniformed officers: a tragic lab accident, perhaps a volatile reaction, or even a desperate act of self-destruction by a reclusive genius. Dr. Thorne, a name synonymous with innovation in genetic sequencing, lay dead amidst the wreckage, his body grotesquely contorted, partially obscured by a fallen beam. The medical examiner, a stoic woman with tired eyes, was already making her preliminary observations, her voice a low murmur against the crackle of distant radios. "Looks like a flash fire, Reed," he stated, not looking up from examination. "Massive thermal trauma, consistent with an uncontrolled energy release. Likely instantaneous." Reed nodded, my gaze sweeping over the devastation. The official narrative was straightforward, almost too neat. Thorne was known for pushing boundaries, for working with highly sensitive biological agents, for an intensity that bordered on obsession. A lab accident, especially one involving a bioengineer of his caliber, wasn't entirely outside the realm of possibility. Suicide, given the high-pressure world he inhabited, also couldn't be immediately dismissed. But my gut, a well-honed instrument after years of sifting through the aftermath of human misery, twinged. Reed moved closer to what remained of Thorne's main workstation, careful not to disturb anything. The console was a melted sculpture of plastic and wires, but beneath its ruin, a faint, almost imperceptible detail snagged my attention. A scorch mark on the reinforced floor, no larger than my thumb, stood out against the broader charring. It was a perfect, almost geometric circle, darker, more intense than the surrounding damage, as if a pinpoint of extreme heat had been applied before the general conflagration. It didn't fit the narrative of a chaotic explosion. Explosions were messy, unpredictable. This mark suggested precision, control. The preliminary autopsy report, delivered by the medical examiner in her perpetually cool office in the police department basement holding forensic samples, only deepened my skepticism. "No defensive wounds, Reed," he reported, his voice dry as he flipped through the digital images. "But the thermal damage. It's peculiar. The core temperature sustained by the body suggests a much higher, more focused energy release than the general lab temperature would indicate for the duration." She pointed to a detailed scan. "See here? Localized tissue necrosis, almost surgical in its precision, despite the overall widespread trauma. It's like he was hit directly by something incredibly hot, something contained, before the lab itself went up. So, not just a bystander to a general explosion?" I asked, leaning forward. "No. He was the focal point, or at least, a highly targeted element within the event. And there's this." She pushed a small, clear evidence bag across the table. Inside, nestled against a sterile cotton swab, was a minuscule, almost invisible speck. Found it embedded in the epidermal layer of his forearm, post-mortem. It's not organic, not metal, and certainly not anything we'd expect to find in a bioengineering lab. It's synthetic, almost like a microscopic piece of hardened plastic, but with a unique crystalline structure. The speck was barely visible to the naked eye, a testament to the ME's meticulous work. A non-lab related trace element, embedded in Thorne's arm, suggesting a direct, intimate contact with something alien to his environment. The plot, as they say, thickened. My first stop for Leeds was Dr. Silas Vance, a contemporary of Thorne's and a known academic rival. His lab, a stark contrast to Thorne's high-tech fortress, was a maze of bubbling beakers and handwritten notes. Vance was a wiry man with a perpetual frown etched into his face, his eyes darting nervously as he spoke. Thorne was intense, Vance began, gesturing vaguely with a gloved hand. Brilliant, yes, but ruthless. He'd step on anyone to get ahead. My research, for example. He tried to discredit it, steal my funding. We had words, many times. Heated words. Did those words ever escalate to physical threats, Dr. Vance? I asked, observing his fidgeting hands. He scoffed. Please, read. I'm a scientist, not a brawler. And besides, I was at a conference in Geneva when the incident occurred. Plenty of witnesses. His alibi checked out, but his resentment was palpable. He had motive, certainly, but lacked opportunity for the physical act, and more importantly, the specific expertise to stage such a complex event. Next, I sought out Maya, Thorne's former research assistant. He was a young woman, sharp and intense, but now she seemed diminished, her shoulders slumped. I found her in a quiet corner of the university campus, nursing a lukewarm coffee. Dr. Thorne was. He pushed himself. He was obsessed with his project, wouldn't let anyone else near it. Not even me, towards the end. What was the project, Maya? I asked gently. She hesitated, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. It was groundbreaking. Something about advanced genetic markers, a way to resequence human cells for purposes I didn't fully understand. But he was so secretive. He fired me 2 months ago, said I was a distraction. I think he just wanted to work alone. Any hard feelings after being fired? She shook her head slowly. More fear than anger. He was changing, becoming paranoid. He thought people were watching him, trying to steal his work. I was upset, yes, but I respected his genius. I wouldn't hurt him. I wasn't even in the city when it happened, visiting family. Her alibi, like Vance's, seems solid. But her fear, that was genuine. It resonated with Thorne's alleged paranoia, painting a picture of a man under siege, not just a victim of bad luck. Armed with the knowledge of Thorne's paranoia, Reed delved into the digital remnants of his lab, a task that required navigating layers of encryption and bespoke security protocols. The IT specialist, a quiet individual with quick fingers, worked diligently beside me in the police department basement, where we'd set up a temporary digital forensics station. He really didn't want anyone getting into this, Reed, the specialist murmured, his face illuminated by the glow of the monitor. Multiple firewalls, custom-built authentication. It's like he was preparing for an invasion. After hours of painstaking work, we finally breached the core server. What we found was a labyrinth of files, most heavily encrypted, detailing Thorne's advanced genetic sequencing research. It wasn't just about global health, as Maya had vaguely suggested. There were deeper implications, pathways that branched into bioweaponry, into what seemed to be a radical redefinition of human identity at a cellular level. It was world-changing, terrifying work. "Look at this," the specialist announced, pointing to a series of timestamps. "Someone was in here recently. Not just browsing, but actively manipulating data. And then, an attempted wipe." The log showed a sophisticated intrusion, not a brute force attack, but a surgical removal of specific project files, followed by an attempt to erase the entire trace of the activity. The intruder had possessed an intimate knowledge of Thorne's system. Architecture, almost as if they had built it themselves, or had been granted the keys. Reed revisited Maya, finding him even more withdrawn, almost haunted. "We met in a small, sterile interview room in the precinct. The fluorescent lights hummed, amplifying the tension between us. Maya," Reed began, my voice low, "we found evidence of data manipulation in Dr. Thorne's lab, an attempted wipe of his research files." "Did you know anything about that?" She wrung her hands, her eyes fixed on the tabletop. "He was so secretive, Reed. Especially about Project Chimera." "Chimera?" Reed prompted. "That's what he called it. The core of his work. He said it would change everything. But he also said they were trying to steal it. That they wanted to control identity itself." Her voice was barely audible. "He started changing his passwords daily, installing new security. He even talked about replacing his own identity, creating a new digital footprint, a ghost in the machine." "Who were they, Maya?" She shivered. "He never said. Just them. He became convinced someone was inside his network, watching him. He even thought someone was physically entering the lab after hours, though the security logs never showed it. He was so paranoid, Reed, it was hard to tell what was real and what was his mind playing tricks." Him words, unsettling as they were, painted a clearer picture of Thorne's final days, a man under extreme pressure, not just from his groundbreaking work, but from an unseen adversary. An adversary with the skill to bypass his digital defenses and perhaps, even his physical ones. Back in the police department basement, the spectral analysis of the microscopic speck found on Thorne's arm finally yielded its secrets. The forensic specialist, a meticulous man named David, called me over to his workstation. "Reed, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice a mix of awe and bewilderment. He zoomed in on the image on his screen, a highly magnified, iridescent shard, its surface shimmering with complex molecular bonds. "It's a synthetic polymer. Extremely rare. We've cross-referenced it with every known database, and it's a proprietary material. Used in high-end industrial applications, specifically for ultra-durable, heat-resistant coatings on specialized machinery. Think aerospace, deep-sea drilling, or highly advanced biocontainment systems." "Any manufacturers?" I asked, my mind already racing. "Only one known to produce this exact variant, Omnicorp. They hold the patent. It's their signature polymer, used in their most exclusive and expensive equipment. Stuff that isn't just sold on the open market." Omnicorp. The name echoed Maya's vague warnings of them. A multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with a voracious appetite for R&D, known for acquiring cutting-edge technology and stifling competition. They had been a major financier of Thorne's research, pouring vast sums into his lab. The trace element on Thorne's body wasn't just a random piece of debris, it was a corporate fingerprint, leading directly to the heart of a powerful entity. Reed secured an interview with Omnicorp's liaison, a polished executive named Mr. Davies. He arrived at the precinct in a tailored suit, exuding an air of carefully constructed professionalism. His smile was too wide, his handshake too firm. "A tragic loss, Dr. Thorne," Davies began, settling into the interview room chair, his voice smooth as silk. "A visionary. Omnicorp is devastated by this incident." "Mr. Davies," Reed cut to the chase, placing the evidence bag with the polymer speck on the table between us. "This was found on Dr. Thorne. Our analysis points to a proprietary polymer manufactured exclusively by Omnicorp. Can you explain its presence?" Davies' smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Ah, yes. Our chronoresin. Remarkable material. We use it in many of our high-performance systems. It's possible a piece of equipment in Dr. Thorne's lab might have incorporated it. We supplied him with a vast array of specialized instruments, you understand. State-of-the-art. Was any of that equipment designed to withstand the kind of heat that would melt down an entire lab?" Reed pressed. "Our equipment is robust, Reed. Designed for extreme conditions. Perhaps a component failed, leading to a chain reaction. These things happen in experimental science." He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly. "Omnicorp has been fully cooperative, offering all assistance. We've even offered to provide our own internal investigators to help with the cleanup. We want answers as much as you do." His overly cooperative demeanor, the eagerness to offer assistance, the subtle redirecting of responsibility, it all felt like a carefully rehearsed performance. He wasn't just a liaison, he was a gatekeeper, protecting Omnicorp's interests, and possibly, its secrets. The polymer was a direct link, but Davies was doing his best to make it seem innocuous, a mere byproduct of their generous support. But accidents started subtly, a creeping unease that quickly escalated into undeniable threats. Reed was leaving the precinct one evening, my mind still replaying Davies' evasive answers, when a black sedan, appearing from nowhere, swerved violently towards me at an intersection. The screech of tires, the blare of the horn, the rush of wind as it narrowly missed me, it was too close, too deliberate to be random. The next incident was more personal. Reed returned to my personal lab, a small, cluttered space in the police department basement where Reed often processed sensitive samples away from prying eyes, to find a precise, almost surgical disruption. Nothing was stolen, nothing overtly damaged. But my microscope was slightly off-kilter, a sterile swab had been moved from its designated tray, and a faint, almost metallic scent lingered in the air, something Reed couldn't immediately identify, but knew wasn't usually present. It was a message: "We know where you work. We can get to you." The threat solidified my resolve. Someone was actively trying to impede my investigation, to scare me off. This wasn't just corporate espionage, this was murder, and someone powerful wanted it to remain an accident. I immediately contacted Maya. Her voice on the phone was a thin thread of fear. "Reed, I need to tell you something. I think I know who Thorne meant. About someone getting into the lab. I met her at a neutral location, a crowded coffee shop far from the university. He was shaking, clutching her cup with white knuckles. After you asked me about the data wipe, I remembered something else. Something Thorne said. He was convinced someone was in the lab, physically, after hours. He dismissed it as paranoia, but I saw it once, too. What did you see, Maya? I urged, trying to keep my voice calm. It was about 3 weeks before. Before it happened. I was working late, trying to finish up some administrative tasks. Thorne had already left. I was locking up, and I saw a flicker of movement in the main lab area. I thought it was Thorne, that he'd forgotten something, but then I heard the security system re-engage, the double lock sequence. It was too fast, too smooth for a normal exit. Like someone had bypassed it, then reset it perfectly. Could you identify the person? She shook her head, her eyes wide. Just a silhouette. But I remember the way they moved. Not furtive, not panicked. Purposeful. Like they belonged there. And I smelled something. A strange, almost sweet, metallic scent. I dismissed it then, thought it was just some new reagent Thorne was experimenting with, but now. The scent. My mind immediately connected it to the faint odor in my own lab, the one I couldn't identify. It was a signature, a calling card. Maya's confession was the missing piece. Someone had been in the lab, intimately familiar with its systems, skilled enough to bypass security and move unnoticed. And they carried a distinctive scent, a subtle identifier. The final phase of the investigation brought me back to the devastation of Thorne's lab, this time with a team of digital forensics experts and structural engineers. We meticulously reconstructed the scene, both physically and digitally, sifting through every fragment of data, every scorch mark, every twisted piece of metal. The police department basement had become a repository of Thorne's life and death, an archive of the catastrophe. The digital forensics team worked tirelessly on the remnants of the lab's extensive security and environmental control systems. Thorne's paranoia had inadvertently preserved the truth. His systems, designed for absolute control, logged everything, even the subtle manipulations of an expert intruder. "Reed, look at this," the lead digital forensics specialist called out, his voice tight with discovery. He displayed a complex timeline on a large monitor. About an hour before the primary explosion, there was a series of microfluctuations in the atmospheric controls. A precise, programmed alteration of the oxygen-nitrogen balance, followed by a spike in a specific catalytic agent within the ventilation system. Then, a few minutes later, a localized energy surge in a specific workstation, not Thorne's, but one adjacent to it, where he kept his most volatile reagents. A multi-stage manipulation, Reed murmured, watching the data unfold. Exactly, he confirmed. It wasn't a random malfunction. It was a precisely orchestrated sequence. The atmospheric change created an environment primed for extreme combustion. The catalytic agent lowered the ignition threshold. The energy surge in the adjacent workstation was the spark, timed perfectly to ignite the volatile reagents, not in Thorne's main area. Near it, creating a directed blast. The structural engineers, cross-referencing this data with the physical damage, pointed to the geometric scorch mark Reed had noticed on my first visit. "That mark, Reed," one of them explained, "it's consistent with the point of initial, superheated impact." The energy surge was channeled, focused, hitting that precise spot first, creating a flashpoint for the larger conflagration. It was designed to look like a spontaneous, chaotic explosion, but the initial trigger was pinpoint accurate. The picture snapped into terrifying clarity. That accident was a sophisticated, multi-stage act of murder. The killer hadn't just blown up a lab, they had engineered a fatal event that mimicked a research malfunction, triggered remotely, designed to eliminate Thorne and destroy his critical research. The method pointed to someone with an expert, almost intimate, knowledge of Thorne's specific protocols, his bespoke lab systems, and the volatile nature of his Project Chimera. The culprit had understood Thorne's work better than anyone, perhaps even better than Thorne himself. They knew the precise vulnerabilities, the exact sequence of events that would create a devastating, yet perfectly deniable, catastrophe. The rare synthetic polymer, the distinct scent, the digital manipulation, the engineered blast, all pieces of a meticulously crafted puzzle. I had the how, the what, and the why. Thorne's identity-altering research was either too valuable to be left in his hands, or too dangerous to be allowed to continue. The killer, hidden behind layers of corporate power and carefully orchestrated sabotage, had erased Thorne's identity, along with his groundbreaking work. But the who remained elusive.